So one of the main topics that we look at in the interwar decades was the Great Depression and how the Great Depression impacted the daily lives of Canadians. But to start though, we're going to first look at what were the causes for the Great Depression as it was different for Canada compared to the United States, and then what were some of the important events. To start, what were the causes for the Great Depression? Some of the causes, you have to take a long lens approach and think of it essentially in the big picture. And if you think about it in the big picture, from the 1929 up to 39, there's a few things. Essentially, it's all around the stock market, Wall Street, New York. And why did it crash? Well, there's many different reasons why the Wall Street crash. It can be basically boiled down to no one really understood or appreciated the importance and the effect of Wall Street was achieving and what kind of effect it would have once it crashed. And there was no money to replenish the money that had been borrowed, as we were buying on margin. In the 20s and before the stock market crashed, there was a new concept called credit, essentially credit cards today. And the idea of credit was new, borrowing money so you can buy something. It gave people who also were survivors from the Great War a chance to buy and keep on buying things that they might not have been able to have before. They were buying cars, appliances, clothing, and as the name implied, Roaring Twenties, this was a good time. Dancing and flappers and like jazz music, and this was a good time. Survived the war, credit, new technologies. Life was good. There also was professional sports leagues, like the establishing of the NHL with the original six hockey teams of New York, Chicago, Boston, Detroit, Montreal, and Toronto. The original six hockey teams. Well, these teams more or less kind of existed before the war, but the league had been reorganized after the war. There also were cars, like the Model T Ford. But the credit system can be viewed as bad, as people didn't really have the money that they were spending. They were borrowing money to spend. And in World War One, the Americans was a major credit loaner to other countries in need. And a lot of these countries could not pay the Americans back on their loans. Germany especially, because of the reparations that they had to pay as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, was relying so much on the United States to pay their what they had to pay because of the treaty. And stock markets, people were buying stocks on margin. If a stock was $100, you could pay $10 now and then pay it off later on, usually by selling the stock for it. But then people started to panic about their money and investments started to dry up. This led to a huge decline in stocks, which made them worthless. People who bought stock on margin could not afford to pay it, even though they had to pay the original price, even though this was what the stock was no longer worth. And if that wasn't bad, what actually pushed Canada into the Great Depression was the drought in the prairies. From 1929 to 1937, there was a massive drought in the Canadian prairies, which resulted in very little amounts of rainfall. The weather was incredibly dry, which made it so the soil would literally turn into dust. Dust would result in dust storms when it was windy. And once these dust storms happened, all these farmers, their farming fields or soils were ruined. And this would have a severe economic impact on the Canadian economy because still at this point, Canada was the breadbasket for the British Empire. We relied heavily on the exports, and if we can't export, the economy would collapse. The economy already was facing significant strains because of the transition back to a peacetime society rather than a wartime society. If those are causes, what happened? That's a cliche. A picture can say more than 1,000 words. Some events happened. In 1932, Canada was faced with levels of massive unemployment. And many unemployed people were starting to ride the rails going from west to east looking for work. Riding the rails means they were jumping on and off trains for free. And British Columbia saw a huge influx of these people, unemployed migrant workers looking for work. So the government, the provincial government of British Columbia, asked Ottawa for help in dealing with this, dealing with workers like this, riding on and off the trains, crisscrossing all over the country, trying to find work. On the recommendation of General Andrew McNaughton, R.B. Bennett, the Prime Minister, created relief camps. This was a nationwide system of camps to house and provide employment for single unemployed Canadian males. And these camps would be placed under the control of the Department of National Defense, but it would be run by civilians. The government did this because, especially Andrew McNaughton, he viewed that these unemployed workers were the stormtroopers, essentially the people that would cause a communist revolution to happen in Canada, as of what had happened in Russia back in 1917. With these relief camps, men were not allowed to vote nor organize, while going to camp could be voluntarily. If you ever were arrested for vagrancy, you were sent there automatically. And so all of these camps are mainly located in either the interior, so like the Okanagan or Caribou of British Columbia, and Northern Ontario. Typical jobs that people do is clearing bush, build roads, plant trees, build public buildings, just work. Keep the people busy. And in return from this work, the men will get a room and board, medical care, and 20 cents a day for their work, which would have been significantly lower than what they would have gotten normally, and that was the point. Is an example of a worker camp in Northern Ontario. Work in British Columbia interior. Labor camps could be located anywhere. It was to keep the unemployed males busy, occupied, and contained, so they will not congregate in the cities, and the government's hope then it will not result in another revolution as what had happened in Russia. Eventually, there was the On to Ottawa trek, or trekkers. Instead of uneasing the unrest, the camps became a focal point for anger. And so, in April 1935, 1,500 of them went on strike. Not too long after, the numbers have grown. The communists inspired a group called the Project Workers Union, and they organized a massive On to Ottawa trek. They're going to gather all the unemployed people and ride the waves like a tidal wave all the way to Ottawa to present their demands for help. They would use the trains for the On to Ottawa trek, gathering up those who are unemployed there. The railway drivers did not try to stop it. But the Ottawa trekkers, they called them, as they would pick up protesters along the way. And by the 14th of June, 1935, they arrived in Regina with about 2,000 people. R.B. Bennett, the Prime Minister, saw this as a threat to law and order and supported the railway to refusing them access. Basically shut the city down. Because of that, the trekkers from the Ottawa trek decided to send a delegation of 8 people to Ottawa. But this also included Arthur Slim Evans, who was the leader of the Communist Party of Canada. R.B. Bennett was a self-made capitalist. This was the exact opposite of the kind of person Bennett would get along with. But they did meet with Bennett on the 22nd of June. With their different extreme political ideologies, the meeting did not go well at all. Evans presented, the communist leader, demands to Bennett. Bennett accused Evans of being a thief and extortionist. Evans called Bennett a liar, and they were told to get out. And so nothing happened from that meeting. And when they came back to Regina, there was a riot. Evans found out that Bennett had broken all the promises, like 3 meals a day. They had run out of money. And on the 28th of June, the RCMP announced anyone who was assisting the rioters, strikers, would be arrested. And so the RCMP charged in on the 1st of July to arrest those who were participating. The Regina riot had the same ending result as the Winnipeg general strike. And as the photo really implies, this was a street riot, a street fight. The ensured the fighting with sticks, stones, and hands. The police used revolvers, tear gas bombs. 120 people were arrested. One on each side was killed. Hundreds of local residents and truckers were taken to hospital and local homes, who were then arrested. Hospital records were concealed and altered to death. On the 4th of July, Saskatchewan government assisted marchers on their way, and most of them returned back to Vancouver. Bennett declared that the characterized the Ottawa attack as not a mere uprising against law and order, but a definite revolutionary effort on the part of a group of men to usurp the authority and destroy the Canadian government. And Bennett was satisfied that he just smashed what was the attempted communist revolt. The government of Saskatchewan was glad to get rid of the strikers